Oh my gosh, it's really late. What is he doing? I keep telling him he has to stop working so late. Hey, what are you up to? Wait a minute. Are you playing mobile games?
No, I'm working.
You're playing them again?
Are you filming this?
Would you stop playing them sometimes?
No,
oh my
don't
God.
film this.
Jeez.
Don't film this. Oh my
I'm
God.
gonna film your addiction. You're addicted. You're addicted.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory. Earlier I used the metaphor of a gateway drug. But it's true! These games are literally addictive, and the developers know it. They're programming them in a way that hacks your brain, taking advantage of psychological quirks that you probably aren't aware exist, and yet have huge consequences on how you behave and what you play. So it's high time that you learn the secrets mobile developers already know and are exploiting inside that head of yours. To understand that, we need the straight dope on the dopamine pathway. Dopamine is a specialized little molecule that's basically your body's happy hormone. Scientifically speaking, dopamine is known as a neurotransmitter, which means it travels between neurons in your brain. When you finally beat that speeder bike level in Battletoads, your brain jumps up to celebrate your victory, and neurons get flooded with ions, creating a tiny electric current. When that electrical potential hits the end of your neuron, the ions pour in and the dopamine gets shot out into the gap between your brain cells like a zillion little angry birds. Except they're happy because it's dopamine. So they get launched across the synapse, but luckily they land in the loving arms of your brain's dopamine receptors, which just so happen to be conveniently located on the end of the brain cell next door. So the dopamine bumps up against the new neuron, and as a result, you get a shot of happiness, excitement, or satisfaction. So if dopamine makes us feel happy, why do we sometimes get bored with our favorite games? Well, one reason we lose that love and feeling about the games we play is desensitization. It's actually the dopamine signaling turning itself off. In any kind of addiction, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or my addiction of choice, Diet Coke, the addict ends up having more and more as time goes by. Your brain still releases a bunch of dopamine the first few times you do that, but over time it starts to go, hey there, Matt Pat, aren't you drinking a lot of Diet Coke there, buddy? Maybe you ought to order a nice iced tea or something. And it tells you this by removing or down-regulating some of your dopamine receptors, literally closing them down for business. So with fewer dopamine receptors waiting to catch all your little dopamine molecules making that leap of faith across the synapse, the happiness signal gets weaker. Sure, eventually you'll get as much dopamine intake as before, but it takes a lot longer and you have to drink a lot more Diet Coke to do it. Unlike Diet Coke though, which I can get whenever I want, mobile games have the ability to regulate how much you consume, thus preventing you from getting desensitized. And they do this in multiple ways. First, they get you to fly through the introductory levels. Right off the bat, you're receiving rewards, achievements, unlockables. In my first hour with dungeon gems, I powered my way through at least 10 dungeons. I was swimming in dopamine. This got me invested in the game early, but as it got harder in upper levels, those bursts became more sporadic and unexpected. But rather than feeling discouraging, it made me more excited because each victory felt earned, and the reward was even more satisfying. This is known as a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement, and is the same method that's used in a slot machine. You never know for sure when you're going to win, but when you do, it's incredible, and the designers make sure that you win just often enough to keep you coming back for more. Secondly, and more importantly, Dungeon Gems, Candy Crush, Total Conquest, and more all have mechanics built into the game that limit the length of any one play session. You play a few too many matches or lose a few too many lives, and the game forces you to wait a few hours before jumping in again. This means they're cutting you off at times when you're most invested. In other words, you're always left wanting more. By not letting you play, the game actually becomes more rewarding when you're allowed to return. This is all related to what's known as the hedonic treadmill. Basically, that as a person's situation changes, their expectations for happiness change with it. Let me illustrate through an example. Studies have shown that people who have won the lottery don't tend to be any happier than before they had all that money. Their desires tend to rise in tandem, resulting in no permanent gain in happiness. The same results come from people who've been paralyzed. They report a similar level of happiness both before and after the accident that paralyzed them. This is because they've gone back to their happiness equilibrium. Their situations have changed and are sustained at that changed level, and so their happiness has adjusted accordingly. But with mobile games and built-in breaks, you never stay in that elevated happiness state long enough to grow accustomed to it. In this case, Dungeon Gems is my long-distance girlfriend. We hang out for a few days, have a great time, probably catch a movie, some dinner, but then she goes away for a while. I remember the good times we had, call her up on the phone, and eagerly look forward to the next time she's in town. So you're taking games that are perfectly programmed to capitalize on some core psychological triggers and adding to that unbelievably sticky formula by also making them free to play, putting them on a console that exists in your pocket, making them super quick and easy to get into and learn, and gosh darn it, giving them an incredibly fun and rewarding sound and graphical design. There's a reason people can't resist these things. Mobile games are the perfect storm of addictive gameplay, but there's one final angle to this whole dopamine story. Sure, these games are programmed in ways that keep the dopamine flowing at max volume by spacing out your rewards, but they're not the only ones to blame. You are. Studies have shown that about 10 to 15% of the population have addictive personalities, meaning they're more prone to get hooked on something, video games or otherwise. Within that 10 to 15% though, there's a higher than average portion of gamers. Tell me if any of the following phrases sound familiar. I only need to kill 10 more cactars before I max out my W summon materia. Thank goodness I finished getting all 2057 WoW achievements before the Warlords expansion. Sorry Jenny, I can't make out with you tonight. I already got a date with Goat Simulator. Grinding, completionisting, and social isolation. Or, put in a broader context, engaging in repetitive tasks, going to ridiculous extremes, and, well, still social isolation. 3 telltale signs that you may have an addictive personality. And to gamers, that's par for the course. That's what we do for fun. So yes, mobile games may be programmed to be even more addictive than World of Warcraft or Heroine of the Storm, but gamers are also much more likely to get addicted to these things in the first place.
Dr. Paul Corkin, Mayo Clinic child psychiatrist, says it's normal for kids to want to play video games, but parents should pay attention to lines being crossed into addiction.
Playing the games all night long, abandoning things that used to be a source of great enjoyment, schoolwork, friendships, sports.
Dr. Corkin says gaming addiction can often be a sign of a broader mental health issue like anxiety or depression. He says there are 3 important things parents who think their child is addicted to gaming should do.